how site selection was carried out. It looks at the constraints of natural environmental assets, locational suitability, open space, greenfield, flood risk and the like. It then looks at accessibility criteria and looks at distance and location. It looks at service accessibility, schools and the like, and other facilities, and at transport accessibility, distance, bus routes and the like. So to suggest that they have not been taken into account in site assessment is incorrect. It's a fundamental part of the site selection methodology. Having said that, I'm going to hand over on the issue of settlement size, as I said.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up on this point about the size of freestanding settlements without getting too much into sort of more distributional aspects, but I think I do need to start in terms of there is an important locational point to be made, that there's a very important relationship between the freestanding settlements and the main urban area, and I think of York. And I think there's a sort of a fairly sort of simple point here, that they are still located. They are freestanding settlements. They are still located close to the main urban area. We're not dealing with sort of very remote rural locations or a location sort of far away from the city. So I think no matter what size of settlement they are, notwithstanding that we do want to support sustainable communities, there's always going to be a very important relationship with the city, which is why the sort of relationship to the main urban area. When I say city, there's an important that they are linked by a high-frequency bus or park and ride route, so you get that connection in, and also they are clearly able to sort of access the services and facilities in the city.
So did you say it's very important that they are linked by high-frequency bus services?
And they are, well, I'm saying they are linked by the either existing or the potential for high-frequency bus or park and ride routes. That's the approach that's been taken. But again, I think the main point, it is not the plan's approach that these are planned to be or intended to be fully self-contained communities because of that relationship and location with regard to the York area. Clearly, there will be a degree of self-containment, and I think the plan's approach is recognising that an increased larger size will help support more local services being provided, and infrastructure and transport being provided within the sites that are connected to the city, but the purpose is not for them to be sort of in effect freestanding from a point of view of self-containment. Thank you.
And as I've said, those features that Mr. Wood has just referred to, you'll see those in the selection flowchart that I mentioned. Can I ask Mr. Ridge to deal with the sustainable transport and the transport implications issues, please?
Yes, of course. I'm Julian Ridge. I'm the Sustainable Transport Manager for City of York Council. Sustainable transport has formed I think, both a very large part of the local plan preparation and also more generally of City of York Council's activity in transport for the last 45 years. We have some of the highest uses of bus and cycle and walk in the country, a record that we're very proud of and we intend to continue with, and which has been part of our activity in preparing this plan. I think in terms of the point that was raised in relation to the 2015 update of NPPF, I think we recognise that. Obviously, there's been a tremendous amount of churn in transport in the last 2 years, partly as a result of the COVID pandemic, which means that some of the modelling work that sits behind the local plan is in need of an update in relation to that. So we are intending to present further evidence to that in later phases of the examination.
Is that to say an update to the modelling work that's already been undertaken?
Yes.
When will we see that?
It could be ready for phase 3.
So it must already be in hand then. What I'm keen to avoid is turning up to the phase 3 hearings and a dense and potentially complicated document being whipped out of the back pocket.
That's not the intention, he said very rapidly. I will discuss with Mr. Ridgett a timescale which we'll let you have before the end of this phase of the examination, so you know that it's not going to arrive on the Monday night before we start, or something of that description.
No, just to reassure you, the modelling work is in hand and is well advanced.
That's helpful, thank you. Yeah, okay, I'll do it in the same order then. Go ahead, I'll come back to you.
I think it's particularly on the last point, there is a timing issue here.
I can't, sorry.
Sorry, it's particularly on the last point that's been raised about both the new modelling, but obviously also assuming that the further work from the Council is also going to include the aspects of the 2015 guidance that they haven't so far done in terms of the mitigation strategy, but also taking the transport implications into account in the site distribution and allocations. And I think that's the problem. If it's not available until phase 3, you've in effect jeopardised the discussion that we should be having here today. And you know, that's our particular concern, as we've highlighted in our documents. I also comment in terms of some of the transport aspects that have been picked up. The Council refers to its 45-year history of trying to improve sustainable transport, but the reality is it has done an awful lot of the easy things to do. It is now challenged in terms of actually delivering the more difficult things, which is, I think, one of the reasons why this work has not been done, because it actually doesn't want to see the answers. But, you know, bus travel in this city, despite the previous improvements, has actually been falling for the last 5 years, since 2016. Cycling usage in this city has also been falling for the last 7 years, since 2014. So actually, even dealing with its existing attempts to improve sustainable transport, it is failing. And that absolutely confirms the need for a step change improvement, and why that additional work that the Department of Transport's guidance on the transport evidence base for local plans absolutely needs to be done and taken into account in terms of the spatial distribution, because some of the answers may need different solutions from those that are proposed. And that includes actually accommodating a lot of the growth in an adequate size new settlement that can be substantially self-sustaining. Yes, there will always need to be links to the city, but if it can be done in those sorts of ways, then it helps to solve the congestion and serious traffic problems this city will otherwise experience from the local plan.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Mr. May.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to come back on 2 points, if I may. First of all, I was delighted to hear the Council accept that these new freestanding communities require high-quality public transport. Unfortunately, the Council's record in this is not good. If one looks at the recent developments in Derwentthorpe, Germany Beck, even the Chocolate Works, they do not have that high-quality public transport service, which includes frequency, services in the evenings, and services at the weekends. And if one looks at the way that they are used, they have higher levels of car use than other communities in the same vicinity. So I would suggest, sir, that you need to find a way of ensuring that this local plan does actually deliver those services, rather than suggest that they might happen if commercially viable. The second point I wanted to make was on Mr. Ridge's helpful comments on the further analysis of what is now a new transport model, so we do have to understand how that model performs by comparison with the one that's used for the transport topic paper. But I'm a little alarmed to hear that it will be ready in good time for phase 3. I understand that phase 3 is in July, which would mean that the papers for it would need to be in the public domain by, let us say, 4 weeks' time. It's already taken, to the best of my understanding, 4 months to carry out the initial analysis of this new model. And to the best of my knowledge, no attempt has been made yet to look at the remedial measures in transport terms, which would help offset this 65% increase in congestion. And my own suggestion, in fairness to the Council, would be to give them longer. And to say that transport as a policy comes up in phase 4 in September, and that if they can produce a convincing and thorough analysis over the next 3 months, that would be a greater service to this inquiry and to ensuring that we have a consistent and convincing plan. And we in the Civic Trust, as the Council knows, have offered to assist with this based on the expertise which we have in transport modelling. But I'm happy to leave it at that, sir.
Mr. Alvin, is there anything in there you want to come back on?
Just briefly. I think there's a misconception, and I'm just dealing with this in general. There's a misconception that there hasn't been assessment or criteria applied to date. What Mr. Ridge is talking about is an update to the existing work. That work has been done, but it's recognised that it needs to be updated. I've already referred to the criteria by which sites were selected, which included accessibility, sustainability, and transport issues. So I don't accept the suggestion that was being made by some that this work has not been done. It requires updating because time moves on. But that doesn't mean site selection ignored these issues in the first place, just as it didn't ignore settlement sizes. And if you look, for example, in the audit trail in Appendix K for the strategic sites, you'll see the different options that were considered. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to come back on the comments about the bus network and the quality of some of the public transport interventions that we've got for existing sites. I mean, I think assessment of the quality of the bus network is obviously a subjective thing, but it hasn't escaped my notice that the development at Derwentthorpe was recently identified by Transport for New Homes as an example of very good practice, one of the few sites that was demonstrated to that. And I'd also want to note to the examination of that in the last 6 weeks we've attracted £35 million of investment in the bus network, largely from the Department for Transport, but also from our local bus company. And this will deliver 44 electric buses, which will be used to electrify around a third of the mileage on the existing network. That's in addition to a third of the mileage which is currently electrified, will give us one of the most electrified bus networks in the country. We've also attracted an indicative allocation from the DFT of £17.5 million for our bus service improvement plan, which is a plan which proposes substantial capital measures across the city to improve bus transport, and will also include some initial work developing the corridors that serve ST15 and ST14 so that they can be converted into higher quality bus corridors. The bus service improvement plan which we submitted to the Department for Transport included various allocations for works after 2025. The DFT isn't able to fund those because they're beyond the end of the current Parliament, but it did include allocations for providing bus rapid transit links to both ST14 and ST15, and that's a policy that we are intending to follow.
Thank you, Mr. Ridge. I'm going to suggest we break now. We're just after 11 o'clock, so we'll resume at 11:15. And when we resume, I'll come to the nameplates that are up on this side of the table. Until 11:15, thank you, everyone.